Ethereum Hot Spicy Takes. Let's go.
And we
What's
are
up, Mr.
live.
Billy? We are live.
Kames.
This is our second podcast. It's a different tone, a different day, different teams, but we're going to continue nonetheless. So I guess we'll do quick introductions again. I'm Kames. I was once on Consensus, but as of today, no longer at Consensus. So free agent in Ethereum, holler.
Hire him.
No, not yet. I need more free time.
I'm Billy, currently still with Consensus.
Nice, dude.
Part of Kames's prior team, or teams, plural. 3 now. Wow.
Ooh, 3.
We were part of, most recently, the developer relations team. Prior to that, we were part of the Rapid team, which was the
best team.
Best team probably in the world.
Yes.
And prior to that, we were on Uport, which is Consensus's self-sovereign identity spoke.
The blob, as it's affectionately called internally.
The identity blob.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have plenty to talk about, somewhat to talk about. We have 2 less people today compared to our first podcast, which I don't know if we're going to publish or not, but hey. But what's the hot news, Billy? What happened recently?
Man, there's always a lot happening, but
that's true.
And that's why we're doing these, the spicy Ethereum hot takes.
Spicy Ethereum hot takes.
To you daily with the most relevant news in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Ooh, spicy.
So yeah, the most recent, I guess, pertinent thing that has happened is another $25 million DeFi hack.
Woo!
Via a very, I guess, simple attack.
Relatively simple.
Yeah. But like relatively well known and probably like the first thing that you want to prevent. Reentrancy. Hey. So basically like this, a very similar issue to what happened in the original DAO, if I am correct.
I believe so. Yep.
So yeah, Kames, do you have any more details about what has been going on with that?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a couple ways we could go because there's like 2 hot angles. One, the Lend F Me, which fantastic name, dude. Could not be a better name. Lend F Me. As far as I understand it, copy and pasted contracts from Compound.
Yep.
Right? So that was like issue number 1. It seems like they didn't really know what they were doing. And then they also didn't pause their contracts after a hack happened, I think about like 12 hours before.
Did they even have the ability to pause, though, in the contracts? Like, did they add that?
I think so. I read a few blogs, and it kind of seemed like they had the ability to pause.
Okay.
But then, like, only put a red bar at the top of their website, which was, don't deposit more funds into our...
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I think like that's the only measures they took. But we should double-check if they could pause it. But I'm pretty sure they could. So that's like the 2 hot topics. It's like, one, it's a reentrancy bug that happened 12 hours earlier. And then they also copied Compound smart contracts because as far as I understand it, this is a DeFi company in China and like not really a well-known one here in the US because I had not heard of them. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, me neither, no. Yeah. That makes sense though.
Yeah.
And yeah, apparently it was like V1 of the Compound contracts that they knew had vulnerabilities and didn't use. Obviously they didn't do any audits. So I think there's quite a few learnings to be learned from this scenario.
Yes, well put.
Don't copy smart contract code and just like get $25 million of Ether or tokens deposited into your contract if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to screw over the people who are depositing in the end. 2, get an audit, please. If you're going to handle money, if you're going to do DeFi things, you really, really need to do a security audit. There's even automated tools like Mythex that probably would have caught this because it's a real
probably. Yeah.
So even automated audits or like security tools will catch a decent amount of your vulnerabilities. 3, add the ability to pause to your smart contracts. So in the event of a bug, you can pause or cease all activity until you figure out what's going on.
Well, maybe. I have a hot take on that. We don't have to dive into that now, but I feel like that should be discussed at some point.
Oh, all right. Is that the spicy hot take? Wait.
Well, okay. I feel like
go into like conspiracy theories and all of these.
Well, if this one has a conspiracy theory, we should totally dive into it. Absolutely, 100%. But I have mixed feelings on that topic specifically. Unless you wanted to name a few more points, because I think you were on a roll with some points. Those are pretty fire.
Maybe we don't trust a wide array or number of DeFi protocols or smart contracts. And instead we have a select trusted few that we typically interact with, which we can talk about later. And Kames wrote a really good blog post about that topic. I don't know what else.
No, that's pretty good. I think that covers it. All reasonable points.
Just like know that this is the Wild West. Oh, another point is if you're interacting with these DeFi contracts, it is not zero risk. These things are being marketed as like a zero risk way to get X percentage return on your money, but that is not true because the risk is the fact that there might be a vulnerability in one of these smart contracts. And I personally consider that risk to be higher than, like, let's say even like 6% or 8% gains that I would get through these DeFi protocols. So I personally don't store any of my money in these things, any of my Ether in these things. I think the risk far outweighs the benefit in this scenario. Not that you shouldn't interact with DeFi, because DeFi is really cool. And I have like a CDP that's pretty significant. And so like I trust, let's say, Maker, but there is still a risk there. And I realize that every single day, and it's always in the back of my mind. And I should probably get insurance on that. There's smart contract insurance platforms out there that are a really good idea. So you might want to do that. But yeah, just know you're taking an extreme risk when you're interacting with DeFi, even though it is really cool and innovative. And I don't want to like curb enthusiasm for the industry. It's just, it is the Wild West. So just be careful.
Yep. And I think those are some really good points. Like the returns are really good. They've dropped lately, so they're not as good. And that's probably because there's so much demand now and like the Black Thursday event, which we should probably get into. But I was thinking before we dove into this a little bit more, maybe we should cover reentrancy a little bit, just so people like get what's going on and like why, like for people who aren't technical, it might be worthwhile. What do you think?
Yeah,
just like
that sounds great. Let's do
a couple seconds. All right. So we'll start with so I'm sure everyone's familiar with ERC20, which is like a bare bones, what's called a fungible token, which means you can basically kind of mint your own cryptocurrency. So what happened was ERC777 it's like an extension of that. It has the same functionality as an ERC20, which is like transfer, approve, and it has a couple of events. Like when you do those functions, it lets other people know. But what they added that allows for this, what are called reentrancy, is what are called like hooks. So when you make a transfer, that is allowed to call what's called another function. And what ended up happening is like when you made that transfer, it would basically recall the function to call another function that would then do some logic and then call that function again before ever reaching of the bottom. And what happened with the lend-f-me is the balance changed after those hook functions were called. And so what it allowed to do is continually recall that function before it ever updated the balance. And so it kept re-entering that same function and performing that attack logic. And that's when, like, that's how that happens. So I don't know if that was a great explanation, but that's kind of like the basics.
That was really good. And yeah, so I guess when you're developing or writing your smart contracts, what you want to be sure you do in like a typical, this is like a little bit more of an advanced case, but you want to like make sure that the first of like thing that you're doing is reducing the person's or the entity's balance. You don't want to like allow them to withdraw before you update their balance, because then you're like subject or vulnerable to these reentrancy attacks.
Yep. And to be honest, I'm not super like deep and familiar with how that works with the ERC777, but I wonder, because you can recall that same hook, that same function, that if you could even put the balance at the top as opposed to the bottom. And I think that's one of the flaws of like that part, is you can't actually update that balance until after. But we should maybe dig in a little deeper. But anyways, that's the technical side of it. We should maybe talk about like, I don't know, what are the market impact? Will this like make DeFi go away, or is the mainstream audience going to know about this? Like, I don't know. What do you think? Is this going to have a significant impact on investing? Because as far as I can tell, this is the biggest hack thus far, like with DeFi, or like top two, right? Like I
I
don't
think
think
you're
more
probably
money,
right.
yeah, I don't think more money has been
I guess
taken.
how much was lost in like the MakerDAO thing on
That
Black
was
whatever?
only 4 million, which then I think got up to like 5 million after it was all said and done. But like somewhere between the 4 and 5 million.
I saw that there was like a 40 something million dollar lawsuit or something though. Is
So
that
I think what they're claiming is like the price difference of like when their ETH went up. So not only how much ETH they lost, but then like what happened after the market price went up and down.
gotcha?
Yeah. And so it was like, and then multiple people, right? So I'm not sure on the specifics, but I only know like 4 or 5 million was that collateral basically disappeared.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, even if that was relatively sizable, like almost this is like equally big. So yeah, I think honestly, I personally think that this is good. And I think that the more bad things that can happen now, while the market size is pretty small, will ultimately be beneficial to the DeFi ecosystem. Because if this stuff is happening once there's mainstream people involved or more billions of dollars involved in the DeFi ecosystem, this could be catastrophic. But right now, the people participating, I think for the most part, know that they're taking a little bit of a risk and they're playing in the Wild West, and this stuff isn't mainstream. And so I think as things go wrong now, it'll cause DeFi developers to be much more cautious with their, I guess, platforms and developments and deployments. And like I just view every mistake now as a hardening of the network. And even though it hurts, and maybe in the immediate term it'll set us back a little bit, I think in the long run it'll do a lot of good for the ecosystem. What are your thoughts, Kames?
Yeah, and it almost feels inevitable. Like if you're just going to have a ton of teams just push out these contracts and you're not going to be super tight on security and making sure these are really battened down, which brings me to my point before where you said make sure you can pause the contracts if something goes wrong. I think, and this, we can talk about how I posted this in the article that I'll bring up, but like unless your contracts are formally verified. And so I'm not sure, and a good example of this is Gnosis Safe just launched their decentralized exchange like last week, which is mesa.eth, and they have no private keys. It cannot be paused. And maybe that's because they formally verified it and they've like proved that you cannot hack the money. But I think it is important, like like you said, once we've kind of battle tested these and teams have really, maybe it's good right now because we kind of prove that you need formal verification and proving that your thing is secure, then we start throwing away private keys that can manage these. But like, I think at some point we're going to have to get there. But like you said, we're going to battle test it and we're going to make sure that like these contracts are good. And then once we get there, then we can start getting rid of private keys and just be like, here's this contract. It lives forever. It's not going to change. You can trust it. But with these
Yeah.
complicated DeFi stuff, it's really hard to argue that we're ready for that because there is
And
still hacks and it's like,
yep. And you have to, I guess, if you're implementing some sort of pause functionality, like you also have to be really careful about that. You don't want like a single centralized entity to be able to pause it at any point, especially if you're dealing with time sensitive activities. So I think it would have to be some sort of like decentralized governance process that would enforce the pause or something. But yeah, like I don't even know if it would be good. Like we want to build these unstoppable applications, and so if you are implementing some sort of failsafe, you just have to be sure that it's not maliciously called.
Yep. And I think there is a balance to that. Like I think Compound in their V2 actually like they can pause certain things, but you can still withdraw your money. And like I don't know if there is like some balance to that where it's like a hacker could still withdraw money if he did that. Like if they can't pause that, but they can only pause it new the funds in. So yeah, I think And it's interesting that you mentioned decentralized governance, because I think they're going towards that. So that there would be less of just like, oh, Compound can shut down everything, and who knows, they'll just affect markets without anybody else's input, as opposed to like, oh, there's a council now and people we've kind of elected to control this, and at least we're in somewhat of a democracy about our open finance. But yeah, man, if like you said, it feels very Wild West. You like really don't know what the next right answer is, because there's so many things happening. It's like, do you do the formal verification? Do you have DAOs that control this stuff? Like, there's no way of knowing the right answer, it seems.
Yeah, and I think the right answer will be probably a combination of multiple good answers, hopefully. I think another big problem with DeFi right now is like the somewhat centralized Oracle problem, or like centralized price feed problem. And like Maker is extremely centralized, and it's a little bit scary. Do you know if they're working on anything to solve that? Like, I think the best kind of solution that I've seen so far, I don't want to activate the Link Marines, but Chainlink's pretty good for price feeds and just like oracles in general. So shout out to you, Link Marines. I had to say it, but yeah, what do you think? Do you trust like the fact that the entire ecosystem is kind of currently built on DAI, which is built on somewhat centralized price feeds?
Honestly, I think the bigger risk is everything, or more and more things are built on DAI. Thankfully, we have like other stable tokens. I guess I'm not as concerned about Chainlink being the central like failure, because they have multiple nodes that feed into another thing, and that feeds into like the contracts. So in some ways, it like incentivizes these multiple node runners to like feed the price.
Yeah, I'm saying I like Chainlink.
Yeah, like it's got a lot of benefits, and I think their protocol is good. But like, yeah, I think it's super risky that more and more people are relying on DAI, and like DAI could collapse at any moment. And like Black Thursday, they were almost like, dude, we need to do an emergency shutdown. And like, whoa, like that would just make the whole DeFi crash. And it's like, if they can do an emergency shutdown and the rest of DeFi just falls apart, that's a really bad look. So that feels very, very scary. Like,
and that's actually, I think, a good argument for Ethereum generally. And I'll abstract it out a layer. So like, you want to build your stack on like a very strong foundation. So Ethereum as a layer 1 technology is the best we've got right now for smart contracts, and like soon to be just any blockchain thing generally. So like, you really want a really stable and like uncensorable and permissionless layer 1 where the consensus mechanism is decentralized. A lot of things with higher throughput are not really decentralized, and that's why they're able to achieve that higher throughput. So you need the layer 1 to be really, really strong, and you don't want it to just like entirely go offline like IOTA. Then like one layer above that, you're going to have these like on-chain protocols like Maker and like just DAI generally. And so like Kames was saying, there's all this stuff that's like, the first layer you need to worry about is Ethereum. Okay, Ethereum is like pretty good. Next layer you need to worry about is DAI. We have to be really, really like sure that the foundation that everything is being built on is really sturdy. And so I think like some of these things got rolled out and they were the best in class at the time, but they didn't have like the rigor that I think they should have if they're going to store that much value in their protocol. And so now you have this like entire ecosystem that's blossoming around DAI, and I just want people to be careful. And I think DAI is the best we've got right now. I think a means proposal for what's the other
Meta token.
I think that's like maybe the next evolution of a stable coin. But yeah, I don't know if we should just build everything on top of something that might not be entirely secure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And honestly, I'm going to admit my own like ignorance. I was confused by some of MakerDAO's promises. And this is on me, but like when they said you can only lose 13% like in your savings, like I thought that was written in code. Like I literally thought like you could only lose 13% and anything less was not in code. But some people lost all of their stuff. And someone pointed out to me that that was maybe on single collateral DAI, that was actually like coded in, but then on multi-collateral DAI that was not coded in. But then I went to go check like MakerDAO's website. And even when you make a position right now and attempt to deposit, I have like a USDC A1, it says 13%. It doesn't say you can lose more than that. And like, I think there is a real need for teams to better pronounce these risks. Because if I'm a DeFi person and I'm building on top of Maker, I'm assuming that like some of those things are guarantees. But if they're not really guarantees, like you can't build on top of that. And so it does feel like a little bit of a house of cards at times, and like how important communication is. And I don't think necessarily the Ethereum community has nailed down the communication part. And in fact, like we need to learn a lot. We're still the best, I think, out of all the blockchains, but we could do better. And it would suck to see like just a complete breakdown of everything because of poor communication.
Yeah, and I don't mean to get too philosophical right now, but
let's do it.
I'm going to. I'm just going to preface everything that I'm going to do with saying that I'm not going to do it.
Perfect.
As always. Are things really decentralized if we have to trust like an elite few who can read the smart contract code and say, oh, this is what's actually happening behind the scenes? Or does the do we just become, is there like this new centralized technocratic elite that like everyone else has to trust? Like, can we build something that would allow, I guess, the average person to audit a contract and ensure that it's going to do what it claims it's going to do? Or are we going to always have to trust developers?
Well, we're definitely going to have to trust developers. I don't think you can get away from that. But I guess as you were saying that, I was trying to think of like, okay, what clever ways could you, like maybe a group of people pay for engineers to always audit contracts and publish like really good reports. Like, okay, and they have to be unbiased. And I don't know, man, it's going to be a tough call because like, I don't think the cliche DAO thing is the way to go about it. Like just, you have a bunch of people who use cryptocurrency. They're not all going to want to pay like a group of developers to audit every DeFi contract. And I feel like a company is going to have to find some way to make profitability off of giving good information about like what contracts are audited, here's who we've integrated, that sort of thing. But unfortunately, yeah, it's only developers who can read and write it. But I think if you make the pathway to sharing that information much more transparent and you incentivize that information to be shared and audited, then it doesn't have to be technocratic elite. But like right now, yeah, most people, you'll notice all these hacks are happening. Like the reentrancy bug has been around for years, like a year and a half. Consensus pointed it out. And like only one hacker is now going to exploit it like a year and a half later. Like you'd think that'd be caught a lot sooner if people were actually auditing contracts. But it seems like no one's auditing these things, and because no one has the technical ability. So yeah, it's tough. I think, I don't know, a lot of people mention Ethereum needing to ossify and like Bitcoin needing to ossify. I think eventually we'll need to, and like these protocols will need to ossify, and they'll all need to be formally verified, and that's just what they do. And you'll know that that's what they do.
And I think we'll probably have like a network of rating agencies, like probably Consensus Diligence will come in and you'll have to get like the Consensus Diligence stamp and you'll get like a rating from, and I don't mean to like shill Consensus products too much, but we built this like DeFi score thing that like ranks different DeFi protocols based on whatever, I don't know, probably security and stuff. I don't know the exact criteria that goes into that score.
And I would also recommend looking at the inspect one, because that one actually, because there's two APIs that they have right now. I'll pull this one up too. I will shill Consensus, even though I'm no longer part of Consensus. It's all good. It's still an awesome product, but because I think this one, the inspect one,
that's cool.
actually looks at like some of the security part, like when did it get audited? Who owns the admin keys? Like what oracles are they using? And it's actually really important if you're serious about this DeFi stuff, if you want to know like this information. So I totally, the one that you checked out, which is good for investing, but they just launched this about a week and a half ago, which will show you all of this super relevant information.
That's really cool. Yeah.
This one's definitely worth checking out as well.
And yeah, like this audit tab is exactly kind of what I was saying. Like you're going to have a bunch of different auditors that are going to hopefully come in and audit each of these. Maybe, I'm only going to trust a protocol if it has 3 audits, each from independent auditors of different standings. And I don't know. I think that in my mind, that's going to be the future, because I don't think everyone's going to read the code behind put on these smart contracts.
Oh no, they're definitely not going to read the code, and it's just not even sensible to do that. But then I also think it's a matter of like, how do you get that information that's on Inspect Codify out to the general public? And maybe you only incentivize exchanges to include stuff that has been audited like that.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. And I think even that might be asking too much of people to like navigate to Inspect and have them review the audit log. I think the least amount of friction that you can introduce to your average everyday user in their investigation of different smart contracts, like that, it has to be almost frictionless if you want people to act in a I guess like a, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like a good way,
Behave properly.
Act in a proper, like safe way.
Yeah. Well, to minimize risk to themselves without actually having to do work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, what else do we have to explore about this? I felt like we went into some good detail. Hopefully this will help a few people.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good second one. Maybe we call it the first one.
Second, I don't know.
Like, yeah, I think I think we both have a million more things we could talk about, but we got to save some content for tomorrow if we want to make this a daily thing.
I think so. I think we should. Then I guess we should end off with like, it's going up on YouTube, but if you have any questions, I think I personally have a ton of time to answer them right now. So ask away. And then, obviously I'm pretty sure you'll answer questions too, but like, if there's specific stuff you guys want to know, we're pretty deep in the industry. We've both, been in Ethereum for 3 or 4 years. Happy to kind of like answer stuff at a high level, low level. Yeah. Let us know in the comments, reach out on Twitter, whatever you want to do. I think, we're happy to help.
Well said. Yep.
All right.
And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us ramble.
Ethereum Hot Takes over.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
How do I stop this?